No. Yes.
Right.
So you guys need an alignment, not coaching.
The coaching industry has exploded.
We want to be better. We want to move forward and keep growing.
Uncoachable is going to be released bi-weekly with a new coach, a new idea, a new approach, and a new takeaway. Hi, I'm John.
I'm Reese, and he's Uncoachable. Okay, you are listening to Uncoachable. I am Reese, and with me is John, my co-host.
Hello, hello.
And John, today we are connecting with Andy Martiniello, who is someone you know. Welcome, Andy.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I've known Andy for years.
Okay.
Our paths crossed. I think I was out west. He was probably in Central. Then he was out west. Then I was in Central. We've gone back and forth. But looking at his career, I think the last time I looked at Andy, I think there was 23 experiences to go through. He's well-versed, but I'd love for Andy to sort of introduce himself.
Yeah.
Tell us who you are, what you're about, and why you're so awesome.
Wow, that's a tall order, but I'll do my best. So yes, my name is Andy Martiniello. I am currently living in Toronto, or a suburb of. I grew up out here in Toronto. I did live out west. You're exactly right, John. That's when you and I had the opportunity to meet. I was out in Calgary for a number of years and in Vancouver for a number of years. And when I was in Vancouver, I had the opportunity to start working with the sort of coaching community. I got introduced to the coaching community through a friend of mine. She is a facilitator and a master coach. And she'd said, hey, you should come out to this session that we're doing. You might like it. And I really did. I went out and I kind of got super lit up by all of what was happening in this environment. And it sort of began my journey in the coaching world. And that was probably about 20 years ago or so. And I thought at the time, well, I really want to get into the coaching world, but I really couldn't afford it. It seemed a little bit too difficult to switch out of doing the work that I was doing as a salesperson and as a sales leader. And so what I did start to do is I started to incorporate the core elements of coaching into the work that I was doing as a salesperson and as a leader, thinking about the parallels that exist between so many of those sort of core skill sets and competencies that exist in coaching. Really, I think, hopefully made a bit of a difference in my ability to be a stronger leader. And yet over the years, as they passed, I started thinking more and more, hey, I need to make this more of the forefront of what I do. I came back to Toronto. I had intended to come back for a year and then spin right back to go out west because I loved it out there. The first 2 weeks that I was here, I met my now wife. And so that was the end of that. Meaning the end of my aspiration to go west. And so I had been here ever since, back in Toronto, and now that's got to be about 16 years. And about 8 years ago, I made a sort of a resolution to say, hey, yeah, I really want to make coaching and facilitating at the forefront of what I do. So I started to really set that intention and find opportunity to network even further into the coaching community. Started to work for an HR consultancy here in Toronto. That ultimately, I then transitioned into working for a strategy and innovation company. It's based in Switzerland. They had an office here in Toronto. So I spent a lot of time sort of integrating with that group. That changed a lot. So now I started to blend all of the work that I've been doing over the last many years in the world of coaching with the tools of innovation and strategy. And there's an amazing intersection that exists there. And so that ultimately informed my work today, which is what I refer to as people and strategy. I work with senior leaders and executives and organizations to help them understand what is the strategy that they take out into the world and how are the people operating in those strategies. And that's the practice that I'm in now and what I continue to build. I've been certified with the International Coach Federation. I sit on the board for the ICF here in Toronto, which I'm proud to be part of that. I've had education from various organizations that are all about the structure and the competencies of coaching, including having worked for a period of about a year mostly out of New York with Marshall Goldsmith, who's very well known as one of the best coaches out there. And his stakeholder-centered structure is also sort of a core of my coaching delivery. So that's kind of all of that. Puts me back here into Toronto. I'm here with said wife, our almost 13-year-old daughter, and our two ridiculous dogs.
Right?
I got a question for you then. So you sound like you're I didn't know the ICF existed till we did this podcast, and it was really interesting to like understand that there was this like industry standard thing that takes a lot of time and energy and things. So is that being on the board in Toronto? I guess you must have done. Don't they measure the amount of hours you do of coaching, or you do a lot of testing and stuff? So there's a lot of, you must have invested a lot of time to get that to that level, I suppose.
You do, yeah, certainly. And one of the things, Reese, that's really important about the ICF is it does sit as sort of a regulatory board. Right? So as we think about this as a practice, it goes beyond, if we think about the history of coaching, and it still exists today, right? I mean, anybody can just wake up one morning and go, hey, I'm a coach, and that's it. And I'm out there in the world coaching in whatever capacity and whatever version that is. Of course, everybody has the choice to work with them or not. What the ICF really strives to do is to be a space that, again, governs the sort of the ethical element of it, creates that sort of regulatory structure so that we know that there's this, at least a concept of core competencies that we believe, right, will make that difference for those that are getting coached. And then we kind of wrap that around like do good in the world, right? Like when you're in a position of influence, and we certainly are in pockets, make the right choices, right? Make sure that you're serving the right person in this mix. And that obviously should be the person who's receiving the coaching and the guidance that you get. Now, there are some elements, I will go on record to say that the ICF really backs it. I don't necessarily believe in. I think that there's a particular sort of rigidity that comes with some of what the ICF prescribes in terms of how coaches need to go about their work. And I'm happy to expand on what that.
Well, I like that we're exploring factions within the ICF. This is exciting.
Wasn't Tom Cruise was a part of that? That's the IMF. Similar.
As I speak somewhat negatively about ICF, I am starting to look around and make sure there's no like red dot.
Yeah, right.
They're going to take you out.
But actually, so it's a great question for us, which is when we're trying to vet a potential coach, is knowing that there is a foundation or an organization that is doing some type of accreditation. And I don't know if at the end of your name, do you have like a ICMF or ICF or IMF or what's after your name?
Well, so I'm currently an ACC. What I'm striving for is PCC, which is professional coach, certified coach, and then MCC is the master. So those are the three levels. And each one has, as you'd mentioned, a number of hours and training. And as this organization and as this industry really refines itself, that the level of rigor that goes into getting those accreditations continues to grow, right? And so it gets harder and harder, which it should, right? It needs to mean something. If you go back far enough, when it was just in its initial sort of grassroots stage, it was a little bit more open door, right? Like if you had enough and you had an expression, it wasn't just anybody you walk in, you still had to have training and so on. But now, for example, you have to, record coaching calls, and they're really audited. Like they really take a close look at how you've managed this coaching conversation and has it really aligned with the core competencies and their core philosophies that they believe to be true. And if you're not, then they ask you to please try again. And so it's good because again, it sets that standard, it sets a level of rigor. And then of course, as we all do, is we take our X factor out into the world and we make that part of our impact, right? Whatever that looks like. But it is sort of grounded in that core sense of structure.
You mentioned the history of coaching, and my mind instantly went back to like some guy in the 1800s was like, this is the first ever business coach. Is there an actual like documented history of coaching in that sense?
Well, it's interesting you should say, because what I believe to be true, and I've used this as a story, is that the reason why we say coach is it goes back to stagecoach, right? Where it's like,
Oh, okay.
you're carried
You're
from
racing out of town after selling the oil and whatever it was. You get on the coach.
right, firing your pistols, and like that whole thing. Exactly, that's exactly the vision, and so it is. You're going from one place to the next, and I believe it was tutors, maybe in Harvard or one of those Ivy League schools, that started to talk about this as like, I'm like a stagecoach taking you from here to there. I'm your guide. I'm along with you, and we're going to this other place. You were here. You want to get there. I'm going to help you get there. And that's where this notion of coaching comes from.
The way you pronounce it is more like coach, like sit on my psychiatrist's couch.
Well, I was going to say, like Sigmund Freud, the first physician to never like physically examine any of his patients, it was just conversational. Would he be the first coach, or is that kind of, I don't know. I guess.
Well,
we ask that question often, which is trying to understand the difference between there's psychological elements in coaching to a degree, understanding yourself and trying to sort of change and improve.
Because psychology didn't exist then. He was just talking to people to help them work through their problems, I guess.
Sure, and that's still very much the case. And I will say, if we refer to it as couch, it's not a bad parallel, because really, at the end of the day, all we need is a good nap. We get through most of our problems. So,
and food. We had a nutritional coach talk to us a little bit about, take care of the gut first, and then from there you can grow.
I got told off for giving my kids treats, and then them treats being actual treats rather than healthy food.
Told off is a little harsh.
A disparaging glance. Let's call it that. Andy, what is your personal philosophy to because obviously every coach is an individual, I guess, but what is it about coaching that kind of gets you up in the morning and kind of drives what you do?
Yeah. So actually building on the earlier comments, I'm not a therapist. We are not therapists, right? For sure. We do have this intention to go out and help people navigate their problems. And I'll frame this not just about we, but me, right? So to your question, Reese. So that is my intention, is to try to help people to create a space for somebody to explore something. But in that space, there's also a lot of accountability. There's a lot of identifying what it is that you say you want, and then what are the things that you're doing, and are they getting you closer or further away from that thing that you say? And then are you open to exploring even the thing that you said you want, right? So one of the most, I personally find, powerful sort of mental models concepts is navigating this thought that what if the opposite of what I believe to be true is as true or even truer than the story I'm telling myself, right? So really exploring the opposite. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us. So
a lot of people need to do that these days.
I'm trying to get my head around that. It sounds a little Matrix-y.
No,
right.
What really is true? Am I envisioning this?
Yeah, but I really like that, because I think that what you're talking about is a really rigorous critical thinking about and questioning your own belief structures and looking at it from different angles, which is not an art that I would say is flourishing right now.
Well, right. Let me understand a different perspective.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So it's a good point. It usually, most of our conversations around career coach or business coaches, your conversation seems to be more from a personal growth standpoint, I think. Is that sort of?
Yeah, I don't know, because I do exclusively corporate centered coaching, right? So I work in the corporate space, but the reality obviously is that there's just people going to work, right? That's all we are. And so, you cannot remove the two. You can't sort of dissect that. You really do have to tie in, and that is the value, right? Because I find when I can balance and I help people, the people that I work with, the clients that I work with, the execs and leaders, balance that notion of what are all the things that they're navigating, the things that are working, and how do they own their experience? Not just how they're interpreting it, but the effect that they're creating. And that's at work, right? So when I'm called in, it's pretty much always because something's not working, right? So there's something broken. There's some effect or impact that's not serving the business in some way. And so there's something to be done. And to do that, we're going to have to look at it differently, right? Like that whole, definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and expecting a different result. So when we talk about that, exploring the opposite, it's easy to say, well, this thing isn't working, so now I want to look at different options. Okay, that's on one end of the scale, real easy. I'm talking about something that you firmly believe to be true, really, really believe to be true. Is it available to you to do the thought exercise at a minimum of exploring the opposite? And if you do that in a work context, John, that creates an unbelievable opportunity. Now, whether or not people take it, different, whether they even begin with it, maybe not. And then whether or not they're open to actually taking on what comes out of that thought exploration, because that's where the hard work is. I mean, clearly, this is what's stopping us, right? We don't want to do that.
I see a huge opportunity in this for Andy to change your mind on something.
On what?
Just about anything.
No, I was getting in my head this image of like a high-flying CEO who's maybe seen lots of success, and that maybe like that, the kind of personality who is like maybe, a little bit of confidence, limitless, kind of able to tap into the ego, but in a way that has made them successful. But maybe has been on a path, and then you come in and because maybe the world has changed around them, or like they're in a new industry, but that must be quite challenging, because if you're dealing with like people who are like considered like high performing, high flying individuals, getting them to question themselves, which is not something they probably used to deciding and just making choices and everything. Is that challenging? Yeah. Well, I'm not one of those people. John pointed at me.
No. I can't imagine either one of you have been right about anything.
Right. Yeah.
Nothing you hang on to. You're fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey.
I was a high flying person.
I'm going left. You go right. Right. Actually, so it's a good question. I don't know if you can apply some of this methodology or tell us about an experience where you've actually done this, where you actually sat down with an individual, and I don't know if you've got a story that sort of wraps around this philosophy, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's sort of an amalgam of these, right? Because this is so much of the work that I do, and that so many of the coaches that I know in my peer group do, right? And so we really explore for those opportunities where we all want to be right at the end of the day. And here's the challenge. So I will say, there's a client I'm working with currently. There's discord in the organization, which again, not out of the ordinary, right? We've got senior executives, large enough company that is trying to pull together disparate ideas to find one path to move forward on. And because the room is full of people that has been doing this work for decades. And so they're all really good at it, right? They all know what it is that they do, and they've been doing it well, and they've got this long track record of success. And so that puts us all in a position of saying, well, why would I do this thing, this matrixy notion of, explore how might the opposite of what I believe to be true be as true, if not truer, than what I have believed for the last 40 years, right? Why would I do that? The thing is that we're in these roles, and in this example, no different, because they're right a lot, right? Jeff Bezos says this a lot. I hire leaders that are right a lot. And he goes on to say, and they question themselves all the time, right? Oftentimes I've heard that Jeff Bezos quote, and I've heard it, as we all somewhat conveniently do, to fit up the story we want to make, right? I've heard it just the half, right? Hire people who are right all the time. Yeah, for sure, right? You're good at what you do. You both are good at what you do, I'm sure. And you both are right a lot. And so as a result, it's
me
hard
more than
to,
John.
Yeah, well, obviously. I didn't want to say it out loud. So it's hard to come to that place of saying, well, why would I explore it? Well, oftentimes the answer to that question, and in this example, would be, well, because it's not really working, right? Like at the end of the day, there's objectives, right? So we think about what are the outcomes that we're trying to accomplish, and are they being met? Well, not entirely, right? Not at all, right? We're not binary here and saying it's either all or nothing, but it's not really fully being met. So how can we explore it? Well, without everybody in this room thinking to themselves, how am I the problem? And I encourage people in these moments to say, if you are sitting there thinking, I'm not the problem, then you are the problem.
Yeah. What if you enjoy being the problem?
Yes, John. If you want to,
right.
totally okay.
Right. Here I am pointing at Reese as the problem, which proves your point where I'm not aware that I'm the problem.
Exactly. But I think that's sometimes though. I think like there's a lot of dropping your guard and being unafraid to kind of like ask that question. Is we're programmed, and especially I'd say with when there's expectations, when there's a track record, when there's accountability, dropping that guard it's got to be scary.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think it raises your point, which is if you're hiring people that are right more often than not, there's an ego that goes with that.
And if your billionaire boss says I hire people who are right, you're afraid to be wrong.
which to then lower that guard to say, okay, I have to, maybe I'm wrong. And that is a complete different mindset change, right? It's to say I could be wrong. I've been hired because I'm always right, but I could be wrong.
Absolutely.
Right? That question of the reality. So that's back to your high flying exec that's been hired for making all the right decisions. Now to say, oh, hang on, you may not. You need to question your reality.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you reflect this fear, and I think a lot of people have it. Is that the world changes around you, and like especially more than ever. So that ability to reflect like a landscape that has shifted. You jump forward every 12 months, and the landscape is almost entirely different. Especially like podcasts in our industry. The first time I ever made a podcast, like in 2014, 2015, like it was such a it wasn't really an industry. It was like a hobbyist kind of environment. So like the amount of change that's happened now, and I can only see how this tool allows people to stay relevant ahead of the game, and also not fail into obscurity where like their business is careering down, going, well, I'm just doing everything I've always done, and I don't know why. I hate everyone. It's their fault. It's like
Right. Well, and that's it. We do find blame because that's where we can safely apply the wrongness to it, right? Because we are foundationally, and you've both been saying this, terrified of being wrong. And there's science that does go to this, where we are responding to our primal wiring that says, if we are wrong, we are dead. Right? We go back far enough, and we don't have to go back that far to get to that point, right? Like if we step into the wrong cave, we are dead. If we eat the wrong berry, we are dead. If we ostracize ourselves from the community in which we are in, we are dead. Like if I wake up in the morning and the tribe is just quietly snuck off, then I am going to die. I'm not going to be able to sustain myself. And so as bizarre as it sounds for us in this day and age, with all of the trappings of society and tools and technology that we have, that wiring has not left us, and so we still that maintains. So if we're in the boardroom and we say something wrong, on some level, either consciously or subconsciously, our response is, "Oh man, now I look like an idiot." And if I look like an idiot, that means these people will not believe me. If they don't believe me, they're not going to want me here. If they don't want me here, they're going to not ask me back. They don't ask me back. I've lost my job. I've lost my home. I've lost my wife, my dogs, my everything. It's all gone, and I'm homeless at the end of this. Right? And that's there at some level. As much as we're not necessarily consciously thinking that every time, that is the visceral response. So we're looking for security through one of two things: approval or control. So when we think about in a leadership capacity, we are trying everything we can to create that approval. And if we don't get it through that, we do it through control, which often introduces toxicity in leaders, right? So it generates this need to be right. So again, to really hit that point, there's nothing wrong with being right. Again, in fact, we're all here because we're right a lot. That's why we got the job. We got the gig because we're right a lot. It's not about being right. It's about needing to be right. And the moment we can let that go and genuinely see how we're doing things that aren't necessarily serving the outcomes that we say we want, now we're open to genuinely hearing what could be different. What could I actually learn from this? And what could I let go? Right. So those are the things, that's kind of the destination that we're going for. Right. So, it's relatively universal. We're all navigating this. Right.
So I imagine that it's like a two-pronged thing, though, because it's not just the individual learning to not be afraid to be wrong, is also making sure they're surrounded by people who don't exploit that moment where they are wrong for, I don't know, like a offhand comment, or, seeing it as a moment of weakness, or, just making them feel like that turning the pressure up on them so that there's no space to be wrong. So how do you like do? I guess you can't just do it for one person. You've got to do that for everyone in the room who matters in that kind of scenario.
Totally right. This is where that statement of, if you're sitting here thinking that you're not the problem, you are the problem, right? Like really doing that. And of course, these are thought exercises. Even that idea of saying, okay, how am I the problem? We're also not trying to create that toxic environment of pointing all kinds of blame at ourselves, right? We're not trying to disrupt ourselves to that level, but we are looking at, how am I showing up and how am I creating this, whatever it is, whatever the experience is, for somebody else and for ourselves. So yeah, it does, again, particularly in a corporate setting, but this can apply in anywhere, right? Any sort of political situation. I mean, you've got more than one person in the room, right? You've got to have this balance, right? Or else you get this discord, you get this breakdown.
It's interesting. In our organization, we're comfortable with failure. We're comfortable trying new things, innovating, and knowing out of that failure exists. And so making sure we've got a culture that goes, let's go for it, let's try. But that said, the personal ego of, I have to let go of being right, it's a counterbalance. It's an unusual structure. As leaders in the space, we're always saying, okay, we have to figure this out. We have to be right and go forward. But as a culture in the organization, we're open for failure. Everyone make mistakes because that's how we get better. That's how we learn. So it's a bit of a
don't let each other
dichotomy.
forget the mistakes.
Well, I think you're right about the ego element of it. There is the human nature of, all the way from mom saying, "I told you so. Don't do that. You should have learned." And so in the back of our brain is going, "I don't want somebody else to go, hey, I told you shouldn't do that, or this is the way to do it." And it's letting go of that. Because that's just ego. There's no benefit of me going, hey, I told you I was right. I told you we should go this way. There's no value in that. The value is determining, how do we get in that right direction? How we get there, that's kind of cool how you get there. But it could be anybody that comes up with the idea. It could be anybody that isn't right or wrong. It's just the thing to do, right?
I find it very easy to change my mind because I forget what I said the day before. Which is useful.
Right. That's sort of a goldfish approach to the world.
Right.
I think that's part of our reason for this journey. John thinks strategically and like 5 moves ahead. I'm just running on that kind of instinct and fumes.
Well, you're still here, so you're staying a step ahead of it.
I'm still alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what? We actually have a trophy in the office that does say, "I was right." So
perfect.
Is that toxic? Is that toxic as hell?
No, there's nothing wrong with that at all. You should buy one of our friends in the South, one of his hats that says, "I was right about everything." Right? And that's
right.
all.
But here's the so nobody claims the trophy. The trophy is given to you. So it's the recognition that, hey, you were right. Here you go.
I think I did claim it a few times, I'll be honest.
Right?
Well, listen, guys, the good news there is nothing toxic about that. That is exactly it. There's nothing wrong with being right. We're not trying to vilify the notion of being right. Of course, we're right a lot. It is about the need to be right. If you're like grabbing the trophy, like, but I was right, no matter what, that's the problem, right? If you're holding it, I'm sure, John, you might be doing this, right? You got it kind of tucked under your arm all the time. Then that's a different thing. But no, if that's not the case, then it's very healthy. And in fact, it moves you to a great culture of recognizing and rewarding good work. That's okay.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
I was thinking as well, like there's a danger as well. So if someone is like determined to be right at any cost, that can be the foundation of a false narrative if it's kind of unchecked. Because if everyone just falls in line because of a force of personality, even though they're afraid to say you're wrong and this is why, you can that can go to some really weird places because everyone and I've been in situations where I'm like, we're doing this now, really? But everyone else, apart from this person, can see where this is going. And I guess that's really dangerous for big organizations, especially at the level you're kind of operating at.
You're absolutely right. And I was going to say, Bruce, because you'd said weird, and I was going to say it's dangerous, and you came in with that because for sure. And if we now zoom out onto a global level, it gets really dangerous, like legitimately dangerous when you start to get people with enough power to introduce revisionist history, right? No, it was never like that. Right. I'm going to rewrite the story so that whatever I'm doing and saying today is always right. It ranges from deeply annoying and irritating to genuinely dangerous. Right.
Yeah.
And so, in an organization, for sure, that is the case. And you have people with enough power who can say, that's not how I remember it. That's not how it went, right? And let's just move on so that I continue to be right no matter what. You get a person with enough power in an organization that drives that type of approach, you've got a very unhappy and toxic place.
I used to work somewhere that had a very high turnover of staff. I think the average was like 6 months. And they would basically deny that those people existed who were there before. They almost didn't want, and we ended up, there's like almost like an informal support group of former people that was meeting under cover of night to kind of like discuss this weird narrative that existed. And all it did was just feed more into that kind of like high turnover. Because when you realized there were like 24 other people who had been through the same experience and that no one talked about them or the contributions they made. But you'd see like evidence that these other people did exist and were part of the process. It just sows distrust and kind of like, you're like, this is like, I use the word again, weird. I don't like, why can't we just be people?
Yeah.
Like, so.
Honestly, it's cliche. And yet at the end of the day, it's like, can't we just all get along? Like, can't we all just each other? Because truly, at the end of the day, you think about all the work that we do as coaches and all these tools and ideas and mental models. And really, at the end of the day, that's often what I want to do is just say, can't we just get along? Like, can't you just stop? Have you seen the Bob Newhart piece? Just stop. Whatever it is that you're doing that's creating all of this disruption, just stop it, right? But unfortunately, it's too complicated. It's too hard for.
Right. Back to the egos, right? Back to the what do I want out of this? And I liked your earlier point that was talking about I think it was approval versus control.
Yeah.
Right? So
security, approval, control. Yeah.
Right. And the control piece is such a weird one for most of us trying to chase it because we know nothing is really controllable, but we still try to, it's like the ocean coming in with a wave. You put your arms out, you can't really stop it. It's just going to happen. Right. But still we want to put up a dam or a wall or whatever it is to try to control, say, nature or people or my career or whatever it is. So there's something hardwired in us that say, I want to be able to control what I can control. So I know what I'm going to have for lunch today. I can control that. So I won't be hungry. But dinner, I have no idea. That's not controllable.
Right, I would say you like control, but I'm very much like universe, take the wheel.
Right.
Will happen.
Yeah.
And that can also be
I do like to plan and prepare. You're right.
You do,
right?
yeah.
Right.
But I'm like, it'll be fine. Just do good work. Be nice. Everything will come back.
That's it. Listen, if people walked around the world with that, approach, as long as, there's always obviously a different point, right? Where you're like,
I mean, that said, I don't have a retirement plan or any pension.
Right,
so
exactly.
It'll work itself out. I'll just die young. It's fine.
He doesn't handle most of the finances or things like payroll. I mean, it's just fine. It'll happen.
It'll just show up.
Right?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we can manifest things in the world, and that's a good thing. But really, going out into the world with intention that's really, I think, a lot of what we're talking about. And intention is one thing, control is another, right? So if we go into the world with the hope that we can control things, it creates so much frustration. And it's this idea of sort of the trichotomy of control, right? Where you've got the only thing we can control, everybody knows, it's ourselves, right? That's the only thing we can control.
Barely.
Everything outside of that, we cannot control. But there is this middle ground. I think Epictetus talked about this, where he says, you can influence things, and that's okay. Like, let's bring that in to say, I can influence what I'm going to eat for lunch, right? In fact, until I've eaten it, I don't know for sure, right? Don't know if something is going to parachute in that's going to spoil that lunch for me, right? But I'm setting an intention of going about it, and I'm confident it's going to happen. You zoom that out to a level of having to pin your own level of success or gratification or whatever the case may be to what others will do. This is a huge source of the problem, right? Is people who go out into the world every day and say, I need it to look like this. This makes me right when it looks like this. And for it to look like this, I need you to do this and you to do this. And as soon as they've abdicated their own level of control on it by saying it's required, what's required is someone else does something or shows up in a certain way or says something or doesn't say something, then we've lost. And that frustration begins, right? We often work under a false reality there because oftentimes people do show up in the way that we expect them to, and it's okay. It's in that moment of pressure, as they say, right? Cracks only show under pressure, that suddenly it looks differently because this person's not lining up in the way that we wanted. And now we have a problem because we've lost that control and we've pinned so much to it, right? So yeah.
What's an example, like often like the most challenging situations are the ones we're most proud of once we've kind of like got to the end of it, I guess. So is there an example of something you're really proud of in your career where you applied these principles and everything you do and you're like, wow, like that saved this company, this organization, these people's jobs? You know, you don't have to name names, obviously, but do you have anything? Do you have any examples that you really kind of like go back to sometimes and go, yeah, that was good. I made a difference.
Yeah, I'll only list the names of the people that totally didn't get it and are never going to. No, I for sure, moments that pop up for me, absolutely. If an organization says, you know, we can see like here was the target, here was the change that we needed to see, and we're gaining that progress. But you know, the things that really stand out for me is like having individuals step forward and say, you know, I am here today in part because of the work that we did together, for sure. A comment like, my brain chemistry is forever altered after the conversation that we've had in a positive way.
Yeah.
Right? You know, that kind of thing, it just lights me right up. And so if I were to hold a moment of real pride and sense of accomplishment, it's in those moments when I get that, like, somebody who takes something that, and I really believe this is not false humility, I'm just passing on ideas, right? None of us have invented any of this, right? These are ideas that have existed since the beginning of time. I'm a big fan of the Stoics, and so I, you know, read like Marcus Aurelius and so on. 2,000 years ago, he didn't invent anything either, right? So, you know, these are just foundational ideas that we put together, and some folks and many folks love to talk about them and can show up in a moment of need, when someone needs to hear something that will alter their chemistry in some way, that will alter their way of looking at the world in a way that not just in the moment helps them, but then starts even just the marginal change that alters their trajectory in a positive way. And that's it. Like at the core of what really drives me to do this, it is that. You know, and there's examples of that. I'm keen to have as many as possible of those moments, and that's what I strive for.
And on the other hand, then, have you experienced anyone who's like truly uncoachable, as we kind of worry that we are?
Well, I don't think you two are. I think, I mean, uncoachable. I would say that. Yeah. Everything about you says that you are wide open, which is amazing. And yes, absolutely. There's plenty of people. And so it's interesting. I'd mentioned earlier, I'd had the amazing opportunity to work with Marshall Goldsmith. Do you know Marshall? Have you come across his work? He's
only in researching you, actually.
Okay.
I'm totally totally empty blank on that person.
I think he's about to reference becoming coachable, which really is the antithesis of what we
go for it. Yeah.
But I'll let Andy get to that.
Yeah, well, so that's one of the many books that Marshall was part of writing. But so you know, he is known in the world of coaching as sort of a preeminent executive coach. He's a bit of a founding father in the space and in the concept. And he says one of the reasons that he is as successful as he is, and he got this advice from Alan Mulally. I don't know if you know Alan Mulally, former CEO of Ford, prior to that, president of Boeing. Well worth the research there as well. Alan Mulally, one of the very best leaders you'll ever have the opportunity to learn from. Really incredible. In fact, he was largely responsible for why Ford was the only automaker that didn't take government bailout money during the 2008 crisis. I mean, I've had the incredible good fortune of meeting him as well and learning a little bit directly from him. And
his line, I think, when asked how much funding he needed because they were going through all of the automakers, he was like, "No, I'm good." And it was no, we're prepared, we're okay.
Yeah, I was it. I'm good. What's for lunch? I think.
That's amazing.
Quoted here.
Right. Yeah. And so really amazing. And he said to Marshall, and Marshall tells this story all the time, you know, Marshall has this whole notion of how it's proven that the less time he spent with Alan, the better Alan got. Right? That was his, but that's because that's who Alan was, right? Alan's just the guy who's so coachable, and the notion there is that you will be successful as a coach if you really pick the right people to work with, and those people need to be coachable. If your intention is to work with somebody who is closed down, who's not interested, doesn't see that there's any opportunity for them to, it's not all about remedial work. It's not all about fixing problems. It's where do you want to get better? Like what in your life is working, but you could amplify by a percentage or two, right? If none of that appeals to a person, go the other direction. There's no point, right? You're just going to waste your time, right? And I do believe that it's harder to do in execution, particularly when you're running a very small practice. But
I don't want your money anymore. We're not a good fit. It's a tough thing to do.
And there it is. There's the rub, right? That is it. You've got somebody who's going out, a paying client, and we've got a leader in our space that is causing whatever sort of disruption. Can you come in and help? It's advisable to, in the chemistry call, to say, hey, I don't know that this is going to work. I don't know that anything's going to change. And I have definitely been in those circumstances where I've got full coaching session, 6 months or whatever. And by the end of it, it's just grueling because we're just having a endless loop conversation. Individual is choosing to stay where they are. And again, if that's it, then that's okay. But we could have done this without all of these calls, and you could have saved your time and money, and you'd be exactly where you are today. And so, there's plenty of that. And in fact, it is one of the biggest challenges. It is where I myself drop what I refer to as below the line, becoming closed and defensive and feeling like, man, I don't know, this is going to work. Yeah. Right. It's when I have a string of those types of conversations, I will admit it definitely depletes my energy. And there's very much a choice that's out there, is to be coached or not.
Well, I think I've got a lot of respect for that position, because a lot of my distrust of coaches comes from someone just meeting me at a networking event and going, I can increase your revenue 50% in 6 months. Or, that kind of hard sell approach. I'm like, sorry? I'm literally holding a plate with some like some cheese on it. So they're going to go, we've just met. I don't know. But what you're talking about is much more, a much more deep matchmaking process where you're not making any promises until you kind of have that, what you call the chemistry call, which I've never heard of before, but I can totally get. It's like, hey, are we vibing like that? Because if you're not, then this is going to be tough for both of us. So.
Right. And what are you here for, right? Like one of the things, the framing that we talk about is the tricky triangle of coach, coachee, or leader, and then the organization. So the organization has an agenda for this person. Yeah. And if the person's agenda doesn't match the organization's, then you're in a jam, right? You'll get the deal because you'll be able to say to the organization, sure, I can be that guy for your person. But then the person shows up, arms crossed, and says, okay, I'm here. Coach me. You're like, that's not how this works.
That must be terrifying. Just like, coach me. Go on, I dare you.
Right. Bring it on. No. If you don't want to be here, I don't want to be here either. That's cool.
It's you're right about that. The first time we'd heard that notion it's not the first time we heard the notion of a chemistry test. A lot of this is built in trust and communication. I think everybody has the propensity to improve and the belief that they can. And so saying I can be coached is I think everyone would say that. I think I can be coached. The challenge is that it's like me trying to learn a new language at my age. It's difficult. The brain's closed up a little bit. And of course, people will challenge me that, you could learn a new language. I struggled with French when I was a kid. But the conversation around the coachability of it, you've got a lot of people with their arms crossed going, I want to get better, but what do you think you can do for me? Right? So there's that, back to Reese with his plate of cheese. If the guy had said, I can make your cheese double, you may have been more receptive to that
double
conversation.
Cheese, I'm in.
Instead of, I can change your business, because there's the suspicion around, you don't know me, you don't know my business, you don't know where my goals are, you may know where the company's. So there's all of these, our backs are up. And once I'm closed and not receptive, you can't change anyone's mind, even if it's like change your perception, open your reality. Yeah. Right.
Totally right. Exactly. Like it would be if I said to you, what if the truth, John, is that your mind is more open today than it's ever been? Spend some time exploring that, right? Just right? That's a takeaway.
Yeah.
Takeaway.
So here's I was watching a docuseries on cults, and that was one of the things that they were trying to say as well, which is as soon as you're skeptical, that means it's working. And I'm like, well, wait, hang on. No, I need to be skeptical. You're a cult, right? So
cults love open-minded people.
Right. So I also think I'm cult resistant as well, which is also makes me think I'm uncoachable as well, because
Sure.
I hear you're a mentor, and I think that as a structure is interesting, where you're sharing wisdom. But I don't know if you can speak more about the mentor approach versus a coaching approach.
Well, yeah. So there is an important distinction there, and you're right. I am just starting to volunteer as a mentor with a group of founders and so on. And so mentorship is really more about sharing my experience. It is really more about advising and telling. And there's endless debate and conversation in this coaching circles around what's the distinction between coaching, advising, consulting, and mentoring, right? And here's where, going back to that comment about how the structure, the organization, ICF, and so on, really have a clear view and say, look, coaching is about asking questions. It's about creating space, and it is always about the individual's agenda. Now, that I agree with 100%. In fact, I would say that's related to the plate of cheese. Like, what is my agenda is to get more cheese, not to do whatever it is that you're trying to tell me I should do. And if you can make this conversation about more cheese, I'm in, right? So the first question is what's important to you? What is it that you're looking for? Mm. But if I've come in with some presumption about that, then I'm going to lose you immediately, right? So that's the sort of coaching framework. What I believe, and in my execution of coaching, is that it's not just that. There are pockets where it does add value to say, what about this? Have you tried this? Or let's look at some strategic model or some structure that it takes us out of just this exploration of, the experience that you're having, right? It's a combination of the two. And again, there are some sort of concepts of this that says, no, you need to stay in that space. And I disagree. I think it becomes a blend of all of those things. So I would refer to my type of coaching as sort of coach consulting, right? It is a combination of things. It really is centrally focused on what is it that you're trying to get? And how am I self-managing myself to stay out of the way myself, right? So because I'm also susceptible. I also am a human being who wants to be right. And so this is one of the biggest challenges in coaching is when you think, oh, I got it. I know what it is. I've got this. I'm going to drop this on this person. And they're going to be like, again, chemistry, altered, the whole one of those moments. And they're like, nah. And you're like, no, wait, let me say it again. I got
to rephrase it. You didn't hear it right, maybe.
No, exactly.
Exactly. And I'm suddenly going, you just don't get it. And I'm like, wow, have I ever just stepped out of the role that I need to be in here? Like, what do I need to let go of right now and come back into service for this individual, right? And so it is a bit of a blend, right? It's a bit of everything.
Well, that's the thing, I suppose. If you're there and you're coaching someone and you're like, I have this knowledge and some resources I can give them will actually help them in this moment, but I'm not going to suggest them because this is my strict code of where my boundaries are. Ultimately, you're there to help that person succeed and grow. So I can see why you kind of want to have maybe a wider view of how to do it. I think
for sure.
It's one of those situations where you can achieve your goals together more if you share more of what you have that can be useful to them. So, do you have any questions?
I do. I'm trying to think of what your goals are.
My goals,
right?
I'm happy. I've got my dream car. I like my family. What more do I need?
Right. So I got my car. Oh, and I'm happy with my family. That's
right. And my dog is really well trained. So
I would love to dig more into the notion of approval, because for the most part, Reese and I are not seeking that approval. I think there's probably something underlying, like when we succeed and find success, that the feeling that we get when people go, hey, you guys are doing really well, naturally there's got to be an ego that goes,
of course,
I feel great. So we are probably seeking approval like everybody else, but trying to pretend that we are, we're better than that. We don't need approval. So my question, if we were to get into a coaching session with Andy and he was to say, okay, let me align what I present to you based on what are you trying to achieve? He was going, well, we talked about Ford. You already have your dream car. And then your family's good and he's probably not going to get involved with your family. I'm not sure where we would go from here.
Oh, you were talking about the business. I thought you just meant.
Oh, well, it is. I like Andy's conversation about the blend with all businesses are run by people. People are the cornerstone of, right? So making sure that you're happy and meeting those.
Oh, yeah. And I think that that holistic view of like everything is, I agree. I think those life goals have got to align with, if people don't feel like they're getting that progression, if they've got goals and they don't want to just remain static, then, you have to feed that into their work situation as well, I guess, or help them kind of grow on those terms. We always ask for a freebie. Is there anything, can you impart any like takeout wisdom that we can try and imply that based on chatting to us and our situation as a business, or just generally in terms of coaching, what is there anything you can share with us that can really make us think? You've given us loads. Like there's a lot of interesting stuff that we've discussed that is definitely going to stay in my head. But
yeah, and I will go back to I guess some foundational questions, right? So that idea of exploring the opposite, I want to come back to that because I just, as I've heard a couple of things and comments that you've both shared in terms of being uncoachable, like just that question, like how might it be true that you are entirely coachable? Like ask yourself that question, spend some time with it, and come back to whatever. And again, as I always say, if you go all the way around with that and come back to the same place that you are, totally okay. I'm not here to, control your agenda. I'm not here to tell you you're wrong. No, not at all. If that's what's right for you, that's what's right for you. All this is an invitation to look at what you believe to be absolutely true and challenge it. And embedded in that, ask two other questions. What do I need to let go of? And what do I need to learn? Right. So how do I explore the opposite? What do I need to let go of? And what do I need to learn? See what comes up.
I love that. Where can people find you if they've kind of loved everything you've given us today? Where can people find you and kind of learn more? Maybe get in contact with you. How can we help people reach out and kind of enjoy your expertise?
Great. Well, I do have a website that's in terrible shape, but it is a place that people can go to, and I can add that link in. I also LinkedIn is generally a safe space. I spend a lot of time in there, so if anybody wanted to grab my LinkedIn profile, you also get a good sense of the work I'm doing and the work that I have done, and of course you can contact me directly there.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your time and everything. John, did you have?
Yeah, no, Andy, this was fantastic. I do like your closing questions that have us questioning our reality or looking at the opposite of our perspective. I think it's just a good exercise, even as you self-debate, which is to say, I have a position, but why is that position that? And sometimes it strengthens the position. Sometimes it allows you to look beyond it. So I think that's really good advice. So I appreciate that, Andy. Other than that, I think this has been fantastic. I am curious, my last question for you, and I know Reese had done this, which was, so if we were to start with you, like that chemistry session, so I'm curious about how do you assess the chemistry, or how do you match that, or what's that session look like?
Yeah, so this is an important part. So I did spend, and I will flash up this book because this is a book that I do often reference. And this book was written by Marshall Goldsmith, as well as Scott Osmond and Jacqueline Lane, a couple of people who I had the amazing good fortune of working with at a community called the 100 Coaches Community. And in fact, I also had the true honor of contributing a little bit to that book myself. And so one of the things that they're expert at doing is coach curation. So they really are good at understanding what is it that this individual leader is looking for, and then thinking about who in our network, in our community of coaches, could be a really good fit. And so that's the next thing that they do, is they create these chemistry connections, right? And so in those conversations, we're looking for, honestly, it's an energetic connection first and foremost, right? It's we all know, right? Like, we don't just process through our brains. It's really head, heart, and gut, right? Each one has its own intelligence, and so it is telling us something the moment that we start to engage with another human. And so that is the opportunity to start to get that. Is this a place that I feel like I can actually open up and be comfortable? And of course, the chemistry call is more about the leader than it is about the coach. The coach has usually got the range to be in almost all conversations. There are those instances where you might go, this isn't going to work. That happens from time to time. But for the most part, it's the leader who's making that decision. And then there's, an exchange. For me, it always is a coaching conversation. In those chemistry calls, it is a coaching conversation, because we just start to talk about, well, what brought you here today? What is it that you're interested in being here about? And the individual starts to share that, and it just becomes a coaching conversation. And if at the end of it, they feel like that worked, I could do more of this, then we're going to go forward. And so in the curation process, we put, 2 or 3 coaches in front of a leader, and it gives them an opportunity to pick from a range of different types of experiences. And so it really changes it, because at the beginning, you do need to have that, right? It's not going to work well if you're suddenly thrust into, a conversation and a coaching relationship with somebody that you don't know that you connect with well.
Yeah.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
I can't decide whether we should call this episode Explore the Opposite or If We're Wrong, We're Dead, which are 2 of my favorite quotes.
You know the one I'm going with.
No. My 2 are let go of being right, Reese.
That's a better one.
And question your reality.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Those are great.
Yeah. Andy,
Amazing.
this was fantastic. I don't know if you got any questions of us, or if there's anything else you want to add in.
I've really enjoyed it. I am here for it. If you guys want to have further conversations, or if I can help you with anything, let me know. This is a real pleasure. I could do this again. So thank you for creating such a great space, a lot of fun and laughs, which I knew was going to be part of it, knowing you, John, and now knowing you, Reese. So thank you for this real great opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and take care. The best place to find this podcast is wherever you find podcasts.
That's where I'd start.